Welcome all on this YouTube channel of Legacy IS. Today, we are going to talk about a very important topic, that is sedition law. Sedition law is significant with respect to UPSC as well as state civil services examination, especially from point of view of mains. अगर मैं in totality बोलूं तो sedition law को एक YouTube channel पे एक छोटे से वीडियो में कवर करना is almost impossible because it's a very detailed topic with so many cases involved in defining the nature of sedition law. But we will try to cover as much as possible to give you a gist or the basic understanding of what the sedition means and what is its status in India. Now, what is sedition law? तो सेक्शन 124A of IPC साफ-साफ कहता है कि कोई भी किसी भी तरीके से अगर कोई शब्द बोल के या लिख के या किसी भी साइंस से या किसी भी विजिबल रिप्रेजेंटेशन के थ्रू या किसी और तरीके से भी अगर it brings or attempts to bring hatred or contempt or excites or attempts to excite disaffection towards the government which is lawfully established in India, then it will be a case of sedition. यहाँ दो शब्द बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाते हैं, एक है disaffection और दूसरा है hatred or contempt. Why it becomes significant? Because they can be subjectively defined, and more so if you see it is not only bringing but it is an attempt to bringing also, which is also a subjective criteria. Okay, एक बार अगर sedition हो गया, then what can be the imprisonment under this provision? Imprisonment can be a life term or a minimum of 3 years along with a fine. Now, to ensure that this sedition law is not misutilized by the state for its protection, there are certain explanations which are also added in the sedition law. तीन एक्सप्लेनेशन जुड़े हुए हैं इससे. अगर हम एक्सप्लेनेशन 1 देखते हैं तो वहां साफ-साफ कहता है कि डिसअफेक्शन का मतलब डिसलॉयल्टी और फीलिंग ऑफ एनमिटी भी होगा. सेकेंडली इफ वी सी एक्सप्लेनेशन 2 ये क्लैरिफाई करता है कि अगर कोई भी कमेंट किया जाए जो कि एक डिसअप्रोबेशन टुवर्ड्स द मेजर्स ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट को एक्सप्रेस करता हो, गवर्नमेंट ने कोई भी ऐसी पॉलिसी ली है, गवर्नमेंट ने ऐसा कोई मेजर किया है, स्पेशली लेट्स से कोविड के अगेंस्ट, आप उसको क्रिटिसाइज करते हैं उसके मेजर्स को, बट आपके पीछे, आपके क्रिटिसिज्म के पीछे, आपके कमेंट के पीछे एक ऐसा व्यू है कि आप ऑल्टर करना चाहते हैं गवर्नमेंट को, बट व्हाट यू आर डूइंग, यू आर नॉट यूजिंग एनी unlawful means, or you're not exciting the violence, or you're not intimating people, right, to be violent against the government and then dislodge the lawfully established government violently, then that cannot be called a sedition, because आप lawfully अपना expression दे रहे हैं against the government measures. Then if we see the explanation 3, it clearly says comments जो कि express करें disapprobation of administration or actions of the government without exciting or attempting to excite against same thing, contempt, hatred or disaffection against the government, that cannot also be called as a sedition. So criticism or genuine criticism of the government cannot be called a criticism. But if we see the recent case of Vinod Dua, this is the reason why this issue has been in news, as well as the Andhra Pradesh case where two news channels, the sedition case was filed on these two news channels because they were accused of airing speeches which were critical of the government. Now, recently also in the Vinod Dua case, where the Himachal government basically filed a sedition case because of its criticism of the nature and the manner in which they have handled the pandemic. Now, if you see the important judgments, there has been a series of judgments, and of course, these judgments cannot be talked about in this short duration. But I'll be talking about a very significant judgment of Kedarnath, which was given in 1962. Because in the recent judgment of Vinod Dua, Supreme Court, while quashing the sedition case against Vinod Dua, also said that whenever you are applying sedition over anybody, especially against the journalist, you need to follow the guidelines given by the Supreme Court in Kedarnath Singh judgment. So what was that judgment? What was that very case? If I tell you that case history, Kedarnath Singh was basically a leader of the Forward Communist Party. And what he did effectively was he basically criticized the CID. He called them the dogs. He criticized the government of the day, the Congress Party, by calling them the gundas. Till here, it was relatively fine, especially with respect to sedition. But beyond that, what he also said was that this is the government which needs to be overthrown. It needs to be overthrown through the violence by the people who are disempowered, by the people who are oppressed. And then these people who have formed the government, it is a government of the capitalists, it is a government of the zamindars. So on the ashes of this government, which is made up of the capitalists, the landlords, the big zamindars, on the ashes of their government, when it will be overthrown, the new government will be formed, which will be of the disempowered people, oppressed people. This was his statement. Based on this statement, in this very judgment, another issue emerged. What is the issue? The very question of our constitution which emerged was whether sedition or section 124A of IPC is in direct challenge to freedom of speech and expression, which is guaranteed under Article 19(1)(a). Now, when we have seen the question, we need to see what was the specific judgment in this case. So Supreme Court clearly upheld the constitutional validity. It said sedition is the need of the hour, because why? If you see the guidelines, the very first guideline, it very clearly says that government established by the law is a symbol of the state. That is why any attempt to overthrow such government by inciting violence, it will be considered a sedition. But simultaneously, it also said another thing. It restricted the scope of the implementation or the application of the sedition law by clearly stating that anywhere, wherever you are applying sedition law, there should be a case for incitement or call for violence. Without this, even for the criticism, no matter how so harsh criticism you are doing, it will not be a case of sedition. So similarly, you can read the guidelines of the Supreme Court in this judgment, where it clearly said that any effect where you are attempting to subvert the government by bringing the government into contempt or hatred or creating disaffection, then it will be a case of sedition. Similarly, but any citizen who is criticizing the government, for its policies, for its programs, but it is not inciting the people for the violence, it will not be a case of the sedition. So if you see, this was nothing, but it was just the exceptions, or you can say basically explanation, which was given in section 124A of the IPC. Now, if we see what is the status of section 124A IPC in India with respect to its application. So NCRB का जो डेटा है 2019 का, वो साफ साफ कहता है कि 2019 में सिडिशन के टोटल 165% इंक्रीज हुए हैं जो मामले आए हैं. From 35 in 2016, it rose to 93 in 2019. Not only this, वो डेटा ये भी कहता है कि filing cases is fine, but if we see the conviction rate, it is merely 3.3%. And even the government itself said in the parliament, in Rajya Sabha specifically, that of 95 cases of sedition which came in 2019, around 2 to 3 cases were only the cases where the sedition was proved. Now, we have seen that there are so many restrictions, the guidelines of Supreme Court, there is very little amount of conviction which is happening in these cases. Still, the government is using this as a tool. Why? Because on the very first hand, it protects the government from the criticism. And secondly, the government basically uses the terms which are very vague and subjective, which have defined the sedition under section 124A of IPC. For example, terms like excites or attempts to excite disaffection, brings or attempts to bring in hatred or contempt. Similarly, disaffection, disloyalty, enmity, which defines the word disaffection. These all are very subjective and vague, and this can be easily proven, especially at the time of imposing sedition charges on anyone. So this is all about the sedition in brief. I hope this would have clarified some of doubts with respect to sedition and explained sedition to you. So if you liked the video, please do like and subscribe our channel. Thank you.